Morning, everyone. Those that are gathered here on a Saturday morning, as well as our beloved viewers online. It's good to see you here, Labas Rytas Commissioner. We are now back to the second day of the plenary of the 35th Council of European Greens. And my name is Elina Pinto, and as yesterday, I will be helping you navigate this plenary day once again, a full day. If the coffee break this morning was not enough to replenish your batteries, beware, there is a strong dose of political vision coming your way. Remember to share all these impressions, all this energy on social media and using our special hashtag EGP35. And I think you will be in need of this hashtag now as we start the day with the first keynote speech. So we have here with us the European Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginijus Sinkevičius. And do not let his youthful vigor fool you. He's an experienced politician and economist, a former minister for economy and innovation from our Baltic region, from Lithuania. And also in his earlier days, well, I guess when he was about 3, he has been working also as a policy analyst and a media professional. So, Labas Rytas, welcome. Please give a round of applause to the Commissioner Sinkevičius. Please welcome him on the stage.
Good morning, everyone, and of course, thank you very much for such a warm welcome. And before I really dig into my topic and into my speech, let me praise the choice for the Green Party, European Green Party, to do their meeting, to do their 35th Council here in Riga, in one of the Baltic states. Because I think now when we are really facing seismic events which are very close here. Tragic war in Ukraine, which is now over 100 days. Region becomes, of course, a central in forming many of the choices. And I think it is very important that European parties, party like Greens, would take a particular attention, because I think you have so much to offer to the region. So really, thank you very much for this choice. And of course, thank you very much for your kind invitation today to address you. I'm of course then very honored to be here with you. And we are at the moment when European Commission, also European Parliament, moving into the second half of the mandate. And if someone would give me a blank page to write my expectations, how I imagined this mandate 2.5 years ago, trust me, I would be so wrong. This Commission was operating in a constant crisis mode on. So from the very early days, we adopted the European Green Deal. European Green Deal, which was an answer, first of all, to a call of Europeans who marched, who sent a very clear message every Friday saying to policymakers that you need to act, there is a crisis. Then we had a pandemic, and now we have a war. And I will try during my speech, of course, to address all of this, but I think when we work with the legislation, we have to be agile, we have to be sharp, we have to react to the new crisis, new challenges, but we should never forget that it's great that we were so lucky and science was so quick to help us with the vaccine. We have braveheart Ukrainians who are fighting not only for their land, for their country's freedom, but also for our fundamental values. But no one found a vaccine yet to climate crisis, to biodiversity loss, to a pollution. And we're still facing those challenges. And I feel that very often these crises, either it's a pandemic or war, is actually used to park the European Green Deal aside. And it's crucial that people like you would always remind policymakers, decision makers, that this is a right choice. And those crises actually very clearly reminds us that this is our path to complete freedom, to be independent, not to depend on fossil fuels, not industries, but first of all on terrorists and dictators who are doing genocide in sovereign countries. But let me now go into my thesis, where of course I want to talk a bit more on just transition. Because I think what's very important that we start to also live in that post-COVID reality. And if you look at our economy, it did relatively well. For the moment when we learned how to live with the virus, economy did relatively well. It had a pressure, and we still have scarves, but it did relatively well. The issue now, of course, is a war, and those scars that the COVID caused is still not healed. And of course, war is opening a bigger and bigger issues, and they're putting an enormous pressure on prices, first of all on energy prices, where energy poverty, especially in the region you are actually now, is one of the highest in the EU. They're putting prices on, they're putting pressure on food prices, of course, on transport prices and so on, and we cannot allow for this poverty further spread around Europe. But when we speak about the implementation of the Green Deal, and now when I finally have a chance to travel around member states, talk with the decision makers, nobody is against it. Everyone is actually supportive, and nobody thinks that burning coal, for example, is fun, or neither I met the government who would say that air pollution levels, high air pollution levels, is good. So, supposed to think that we have a clear path and solutions to move on. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And this second half of mandate will require a lot of work to actually ensure that the Green Deal is implemented, and that actually sidelining Green Deal, we're not going to run into business as usual, which actually trapped us in the situation which we very much find ourselves at the moment. Because, first of all, I think what was very important from the very beginning when we announced the Green Deal, that the Green Deal is not only about the CO2 numbers, which everyone concentrates a lot about. It's not about minus 51 or 0 by 2030. It's much more than that. It's a transition which will require changes in many areas. And of course, one of the key aspects of that transition is that our deal has to work for all and has to be fully inclusive. And I'm of course very pleased today to share this room with people who know that very well, who know that the green policies are social, economic, health policies, and they just as much as they are policies for climate and environment. And as I said, you know, we're facing multiple threats. Just a couple months ago, in April, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported that we have already reached 1.1 degrees of global warming. It also warned us that it's now or never to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. So that bell is ringing louder than ever before and clearer than ever before. Looking back at what we have managed to achieve in those 2 years, I think the progress was remarkable. So first of all, we have adopted a climate law that gives our 1.5 degree not only sort of aspiration and ambition, but gives a legal certainty. We have new circular economy action plan, the biodiversity strategy, which needs a lot of support and understanding, the farm to fork strategy, zero pollution action plan, a strategy for a smart and sustainable mobility, and of course the renovation way. And now we are laying down the legal framework that translates these strategies into binding rules, into implementation on the ground within the member states. And that means very concrete proposals, such as addressing, for example, batteries, production and the whole life cycle, eco-design for sustainable products, which has to completely change how we consume and what footprint we as a consumers actually leave behind. Waste shipment, deforestation, that's the single biggest act of nature protection globally. And of course, a very important, a crucial, the coming nature restoration law, which I feel very much that it's been taken sort of to divide nature, to say, so there is a part of nature for agriculture, there is a part of nature for energy, maybe for transportation, and there is something else left. But this is not how the nature thinks. Pollinators, they do not define and they do not choose. They need a space. Farmland birds, they really don't care about where the agricultural land starts and where it ends. They approach nature as their home, and we should do the same. We cannot be splitting it into pieces. And very much I meet this often a mistake where someone wants to divide it. That division is not going to work. If we will lose those precious ecosystem services, if we won't be able to address them, no technology is going to save us, and we might get to a zero at 2050, but there will be nothing to replace the ecosystem services. But let's look at the tools to become climate neutral and more resilient, because with all of them, in the end of the day, we will also going to need to factor in social concerns. Social concerns because this is a very basic fundamental need of people. And if we want to have people's support behind our policies, our green policies, we of course need to understand people's needs and find a way to address them. And of course, this difficult times, on contrary, is not supposed to serve as an excuse not to implement European Green Deal, but it must serve as a must to implement the Green Deal. And our social fabric is already fragile. As I said, with COVID, with war, inequality is increasing, especially a division between rich and poor, and also richer and poorer countries, even the regions within the countries. Food prices, of course, is very much pressured by the inflation, but here is a very important moment that Europe is not facing any food shortages, and it's not going to face. We have to, of course, ensure that other regions don't as well, and that's an important work to be done. But Europe itself is not facing food insecurity. Of course, the price of energy is already a major issue, and at least 35 million Europeans are already affected. But here again, we have to remember that a breaking point is approaching, and there is no turning back. And some might say that for all these reasons, this is not the time for transition, but I completely disagree. This is excellent time for a transition. And we know that that can happen in the regions, because when transitions are managed well, regions actually gain a lot more opportunities and completely new way of further perspective. And here I would like to address the other hat of my portfolio of fisheries, which I can say that looking at our coastal communities, very clearly they are very much dependent on two major activities, fisheries and tourism, which is good and great probably in peaceful times. But COVID was a complete bust for those activities, and that of course had a major impact on the communities. Now with huge fuel prices, because this sector is not decarbonized, we again have communities in a very difficult time. So it clearly shows that with public money, with public support, we can help to relieve that pain, but very temporary. If we won't have a full plan of decarbonization, those regions will be trapped all the time, and not always we're going to have enough public money to support. So what is Europe doing? So of course, one of the main tools is our funds, our EU's multi-annual financial framework for the period of 2021 and 2027, which together with the next generation EU recovery instrument provides an unprecedented 1.8 trillion euros for investments. And here is a very important and crucial word for investments. Not to keep the business as usual going, but invest to make a future digital and greener. And a large sum of that funding must go to support green, just, and digital transition. Because the current situation is definitely is not about the business as usual. And that's why for this period, as you might know, Commission also have set out a Just Transition Fund. It should be not seen as a sort of another fund for traditional infrastructure investments or social fund. On contrary, it should be seen as a game changer for those regions who are willing to undergo a transition, and we must, of course, help them to keep the transition just and keep everyone on board. Because this is a unique chance with unprecedented amount of public money spent to help people, to help regions that will be hardest hit by the transition to go smoothly through that transition and be an example, not only in Europe, but around the world. The Just Transition Fund allows for a place-based approach in line with local needs and local strengths, and the people on the ground in these regions, they are best placed to know what investments are needed for creating new jobs, new opportunities, retraining workers, and revitalizing abandoned sites. They are the people who can tailor these solutions best, and they can follow closely the implementation of strategies that have been adopted. And most importantly, they know and they can feel that they are part of Europe. In addition to Just Transition Fund for the period of 2025 and 2032, the Commission has proposed the creation of a new social climate fund. This funding would address the social impacts of the extension of emissions trading to road transport and buildings on vulnerable households, micro enterprises, and transport users. So what's very important is, of course, that the Green Deal is not an island. It's an overarching approach to transform our socio-economic model. And the Just Transition agenda is included in other priorities of the Commission, of this Commission, to mitigate the risks of the transition, in particular for the poorer households. And of course, major and biggest risk is always skills, how to quickly retrain. So returning back to those coastal communities, I see a very clear pattern that where the renewable energy projects are developed, many young people, sons, daughters of fishermen and women, they choose actually to work in the renewable energy industry. But what is going to happen with people who are still involved in the industry, and there might be a significant changes? We have to ensure and, of course, keep them on board. So what's very important is, of course, European skills agenda, because it includes a pact for skills to enhance development in specific sector, bringing together employers, workers, and public employment. Skills partnerships are already in place for renewable energies, construction, and of course, energy-intensive industry. There is another dimension of inequality, which is not getting very often enough attention, and it's environmental inequality. First of all, this can be seen through the two aspects. One is that poorer households, they are much more affected by environmental degradation and climate change and pollution, as they are more likely to live in areas with poor air quality, poor water quality, less likely have access to high quality products and green areas, and of course they are much more exposed. So the green transition have to generate major social co-benefits for all, and I talk about the better health thanks to improved air quality and, of course, first of all, reduced pollution. Because it's that easy, but not always actually reflected in government policies, because the poor air quality has a direct impact on putting a huge pressure on your social and healthcare bills, while the investments into improving the air quality and water quality would significantly decrease that. Another pressure, of course, is the loss of biodiversity, and then that possesses the biggest threat to our food insecurity. Situation in Ukraine is tragical. And yes, there is around 40 million tons of grain at the moment that cannot leave Ukraine, and we need to find solutions how to unblock Ukrainian ports to ensure that that grain reaches especially African countries. But if you listen carefully, this is not an issue of a food insecurity caused by not enough output of agriculture. On the contrary, this is a logistical issue, which we have to solve as a logistical issue. And we cannot, with that logistical issue, cover and postpone implementation of the EU's biodiversity strategy and especially nature restoration legislation. Because, as I said, those 10% of land set aside, they might be not producing crops and yields directly, but indirectly they will be immensely contributing that agricultural land would have a way bigger output. So I will probably be finalizing here. All the elements that I have mentioned so far, they are already in place. But the second half of the mandate facing this seismic crisis is going to be crucial. Are we going to be able to continue on that great and ambitious path that we have started? Are we going to be able to fill the implementation gap and implement all of the ambition on the ground? Because that's what really matters in the end. So as I look to the longer term, I think that your help, your active involvement would be very much appreciated in different areas. And one of the areas which I have left for the very end is, of course, taxation. Because taxes, they play a crucial role. And we must shift taxation burden from labor towards pollution and resource use. Then we would lay a very clear foundations of a more sustainable future. We would also boost job creation as labor costs would be lower across the board. And what's very important, that would contribute to those fundamental issues and addressing the triple crisis that I have mentioned. We have started some initiatives under the Fit for 55 package, which Parliament will be voting on very soon. A greener approach to taxation would pay enormous dividends very quickly in terms of speeding up the transition. So it will take a number of years to roll out the actions announced under the umbrella of the European Green Deal, but those benefits will be shared and felt by all and not create a bigger divide. I can guarantee you that. That will be felt by the environment, by the industry, and by the people that we have a privilege to serve for. Green policies, they always backed by a solid economic logic with truly inclusive social aspects, which I tried to emphasize on today, partnering ambitious policies for climate. And that is the future that Europe, citizens, and this beautiful planet deserves. So I firmly believe in that. I'm sure that you also do. And with your help, in the European Parliament, in the governments, in the local parliaments, in the regional parliaments, even in the regional groups, we can make this transition happen on the ground. Thank you very much.